Call the city council meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining.
Here.
Germain.
Here.
Present.
Felder.
Here.
Whitman.
Excused.
Stillgrave. Mayor Clark.
Present. I ask we all please rise for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Guide us in our deliberations and discussions this evening. May our efforts promote the good of the residents of this city and all who visit.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to
to
the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, first item, please.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the regular agenda.
There's also Mr. Pastou.
Under a couple items. One is, again, a reminder under manager comments, I'm going to include the discussion regarding the Mason Run zoning that we didn't get to on the work session as proposed, but also I'm going to have Parks and Rec Director Loretta Lapointe do a quick PowerPoint related to the 6 neighborhood streetscape projects that we have and look to make some additional improvements to go along with those. So I'll include that in there. And then the other part of it is the consideration with the amendment to the development agreement for the former Lazy Boy headquarters site. Mr. Buds, I don't know if you want to put some more language to that.
Your Honor, as we discussed, I think the request is that we have a motion to amend the agenda to add consideration under council action for amendment to the development agreement with Great Lakes Opportunity Program and Squire Properties relating to the redevelopment of the former Lazy Boy headquarters.
Councilman Lamore, you have a motion?
Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda. And the motion includes to add an item under council action, consideration of amendment to development agreement with Great Lakes Opportunity Program LLC for the former Lazy Boy headquarters site.
Second.
There's a motion by Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilman Felder, to amend the agenda to add under council action for the item stated regarding the development of the former Lazy Boy site. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining.
Yes.
Germain.
Yes.
Lamore.
Yes.
Felder.
Yes.
Stillgrave.
Yes.
Mayor Clark.
Yes. Next item, please.
The next item is the consent agenda, and for item B, approval of payments to vendors. The amount should read $684,019.86, 684,019.86.
Thank you. Are there any items on the consent agenda that council wishes to have pulled for further discussion? Any items on the consent agenda council members wish to have pulled? Seeing none, are there any items on the consent agenda those present here this evening wish to have pulled for further discussion? Any items on the consent agenda for further discussion? Seeing none, a motion be in order. Councilman Felder?
Your Honor, I'd like to make a motion that all items on the consent agenda be accepted, placed on file, recommendations carried out, and resolutions adopted.
Second.
Councilman Felder, supported by Councilman Lamore, that all items on the consent agenda be accepted, placed on file, recommendations carried out, and resolutions adopted. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining.
Yes.
Germain.
Yes.
Lamore.
Yes.
Felder. Stillgrave.
Yes.
Yes. Clerk, next item, please.
So the next item on the agenda is presentations, communications, and public hearings, and there are no items under that. So we will move to council action. And the first item under council action is item 3468, Spring 2022 Street Tree Purchase.
Mr. Pastou?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to ask Mr. Patrick Lewis, City Engineer, to give a brief overview of the item before you.
Honorable Mayor and Council, Patrick Lewis, Director of Engineering and Public Services. Before you tonight, we're doing something that I had mentioned back in the fall when we approved the contract to remove 101 trees, and that was we were going to postpone some of our fall planting program to a spring planting program, and then, of course, also have a fall 22 planting. So this program here, we scoured to try to find as many good quality, high, large diameter trees as we could. So you'll see that a lot of this, although we are not replacing every single one yet, we still have some stumps we need to grind, but we are replacing the majority of areas in the Godfrey Borges St. Mary's neighborhood on this spring planting. And that's partially, as you've heard me say before, our spring planting is a little more difficult because the trees go into summer and then they can get stressed out by the heat. So, but in this particular neighborhood, we expect a greater degree of cooperation because this, some areas really love their trees, and you can tell. And this is one I'm sure that we will be more likely to have assistance from the residents in watering, as well as being able to plant in a concentrated area, which makes it for us to do some supplemental watering, try to get those established. In a concentrated area like this will help. So we tried to do the best we could. Tony Abbott, our forester, solicited bids. As you can see in the spreadsheet there, we're not awarding everything we bid because we looked at different sizes. We wanted to see what pricing we had, which nurseries had which species. And I pointed out in the fact sheet some of the things on there. Obviously, we do have some 3 and 4 inch trees that are coming in, and we got alternate pricing on those, and it's actually quite good. The drawback on some of the larger trees is they've been growing for 5 or 6 years, so they're, I'll say, 10 to 15% of the way through their life cycle. That's one of the disadvantages of getting larger trees. But fortunately, we do have a lot of areas that will accommodate those. I won't bore you with a whole bunch of statistics. The other area, so I think we, as I mentioned on there, we had a total of 78 replants in that neighborhood, which is more than we took down in that neighborhood, but there were also some that came down the storm too. That's why I said I'm not going to make a warranty that this represents every single tree that was taken down, but it's close. We did as many as we could. The other area that we're doing a lot of trees on was Riverview Avenue. Those of you remember that was a proactive removal. We looked at how close many of those were to the curb line. That was a full curb replacement job. And when you have roots that are actually hanging over the curb, it's a pretty good bet by the time we get done having to replace all those curbs that the trees are going to be damaged to the point where they're a hazard. So we proactively removed a lot of those, but with the intention that we're going to replace those. The Riverview trees are ones where we're getting some of the more columnar trees because that's a tighter terrace in that area. So we are using the species, which is the, I had this at the tip of my tongue, but the Zelkovas. And we got a combination of Zelkovas and those. We had some of those planted on South Monroe Street. And we're using a Turkish hazelnut, which is a new flowering street tree. That's actually a very popular tree, but we haven't used it before. So we're going to try mixing and matching those. We were able to get in a number of areas, like I said, I won't rattle off all the stats here, but we have and cherries. We got 18 of those that we actually found in 4 inches, so that was good. And we have some crabs, some 3-inch crabs, and some 3-inch pears. We do have a couple of locations. The tulip poplar and a couple of the Zelkovas were hard to get in the 3 inches, and in fact, I don't think we had any bids on a couple of those. So we moved ahead with the 2.5-inch caliper, and in one case we had a 2-inch caliper on those. The more popular the tree, generally, it was harder to find. So we did the best we could here, and I think we've got a pretty good percentage. I asked Tony to run me an average, just so we had it. The fall 2021 average caliper tree was about 2.25 inches, and we are about 2 2/3 average for this one. So we're trying to bump those numbers up, but I wanted to just stress that we're looking to try to accelerate our planting. So we've got 153 total plantings, plus we've got 3 spares in here. So we'll be back at you in the fall here with additional purchases, but just wanted to give you an update on where we were and that we are aggressively trying to move forward as quickly as we can to get these replanted for you.
Thank you, Patrick. I know with all those, also there's some additional pages to your in the fact sheet, which is obviously for public to see as well. A list of all those trees, where they're going, and locations by residents. Some of those replacements, but also some of those that have been vacant for a while. that are filling in, as you said. So I encourage people to look on the city's website for the record to see where those are, what they are, and also the bid sheet and the pricing. It was interesting to me to see that, while we have a proposal here for a cost, that not all of those that submitted bids could even bid on those particular trees. And so there's the highlights of which ones are going in, and you can see the cost comparison. So I want to thank you for all the work on that.
Sure. Well, Tony Abbott's the one that does all the legwork for me. I just have to write up the voluminous information that
Wow.
you get to see.
Well, my thanks goes out to him. Councilman Lamore.
Do these trees come with instructions for the?
We'll send a letter out to the residents there and say we
Great.
appreciate
Because
just
I'm certain that some of them have particular instructions, like for instance, this tree versus that tree, there's something different that has to be done when in terms of watering at certain times of day, et cetera.
we will. I wish I had a copy of the letter that we typically send handy, but I can get that for you. But typically it's going to be no more than just it's a friendly letter that says, help us. We do our best to try to establish them, but as I mentioned, we're an old town that's got and we have heavy clay soils in a lot of areas, and so that we're not a great environment for growing trees, but so every little bit that we can get assistance from the fronting resident, the better. But we're going to go around and make the rounds too, and we'll take care of the pruning, the trimming. I mean, we don't expect residents to get to that level, but it's the ones we have a better success rate are the ones where the people want the trees, they care about the trees, and they're willing to. If they see it looks a little dry, it's been a little dry out, and they haven't seen us come by in a couple of days, they'll help us out and water it a little bit. By no means an obligation or a requirement, but we'll get those instructions out.
I think that that's what they want, though. I think they want to help. So,
We're more willing to take a chance in that neighborhood, in the neighborhoods where we had to remove a whole bunch of them, because it was clear that those residents care about their tree canopy and are more likely to help us out a little bit. So,
thank you.
So, Councilman Felder.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Lewis, for making this presentation. I see in your report you say over 1%, it's about 1.4% of the total city tree reservoir that we're putting back into the system this year. Do we anticipate the fall planting to be about that again?
oh yes, I believe so. I think I've seen the list of what's already on it, which again we try to look at our workload, and we want to be effective at doing this. I mean, we don't want to dedicate a month and a half to planting trees, so that's why we try to split it up a little bit here with our other duties. But I would anticipate probably the same number again in the fall. But some of that's going to be if we are able to identify some other areas that we may have missed in years past, where the residents aren't necessarily asking for them, but where we've seen those holes. And there's areas in town where we know about them, that we can be a little more aggressive on there. It's just some of it comes down to funding in the budget, which I know council is more than willing to look at alternatives if it's not adequate in our operating budget. But I would be surprised if it's less than this amount again in the fall.
Okay, and yeah, and that would be my only concern and question there, is if this is aggressive enough to keep up our structure. If it's 1%, that anticipates a 100-year lifespan for our trees, which might not get us across the finish line there. But if it's 1.4 times 2, that assumes a 30 to 50-year lifespan, and I think that's much more reasonable.
That's
so I just
reasonable.
want to make sure that this plan is aggressive enough. I see you are exploring more columnar species, I guess. So we've spoke about that in previous plantings in previous years. So
If we have utility lines, we'll go with the smaller, like the flowering, like a crab or something like that. But the columnar trees are more appropriate. We have narrow terrace, but not necessarily overhead lines.
okay.
So we'll do our best. But yeah, that's the number we were shooting for, around 3%, because that you have a blend of the ornamental trees that are more like 25 to 30-year lifespan, and then you have some trees that can be up to 100 years. So blending those out there, I think that's a good cycle.
But I'm glad that the plan is sufficiently aggressive to maintain a stable load. So
We're gonna do our best, and I've given instructions to my staff to do just that. So looking forward to doing it.
Councilman Germaini?
Thank you, Your Honor. In the fall, will there be any chance that we'll be able to get and sustain the wider trunk trees? Is that going to be a struggle still?
I don't want to say everything's been a struggle the last couple of years with supply, and it wouldn't seem like trees would be something that is a struggle, but it still goes back to were people working? I mean, 2 years ago when people weren't able to work, and I know nurseries and some outdoor activities were things that were allowed, but it's an improving economy as well, because as people have money they can spend on things, and this is one of those things that's naturally grown, I would anticipate continued supply problems. That's why we have to, and these are 3 large nurseries we work with too. These aren't just, some local ones. So we'll continue scouring our corner of the earth to get the best price we can, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a similar situation in the fall.
Thank you.
Other comments? I'll just add on to this, and it goes with Councilman Felder's. I appreciate on the list as well, and people can see that why there's a particular type of tree and the planting location, whether it's restricted, unrestricted, or semi-restricted. And of course, it may be the width of the terrace, it might be the overhead wires, it might be a variety of reasons. So that's why particular trees are selected for a particular location. So I want to thank you for adding that onto the location listing as well.
You're very welcome. And I would add, too, one of the rule of thumbs when we talk about restricted and unrestricted, they usually say about 2 feet of root ball for every inch diameter. So if you're looking at a 4-inch tree, you need an 8-foot root ball to avoid damaging those roots. And so 8 feet's about the limit of most of our terraces in town. So you're taking up most of the width of the terrace at that point.
We've long discussed with council, and not just recent, but past years as well, as, we want the larger caliper as possible, but the reality is that some of our terraces are maybe 2 feet, and unless you're taking out the sidewalk and other stuff, you just can't make a big enough hole. But that's not the case everywhere, because we do have some 5-foot terraces and others, and in particular, some of the neighborhoods we've talking about. So we're trying to put those larger calipers there as we can find them. So I appreciate the effort. And thank Tony as well.
Okay.
Other questions?
Let's make a motion.
Just a motion, Councilman Moore?
Thanks a lot.
Your Honor, I make a motion that the City Council approve an expenditure of up to $28,000 for the purchase of trees for the 2022 Fall Planting Program to North Branch Nursery Incorporated, that the Director of Engineering and Public Services or his designee be authorized to enter into any necessary agreements or purchase orders on behalf of the city, and that the Finance Director be authorized to make any budget transfers, including from general fund contingencies or other fund reserves that are necessary to complete the purchase.
Motion by Councilman Moore, supported by Councilwoman Stilgrave, on item 3468, the spring 2022 street tree purchase. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Biding? Jermaine?
Yes.
Littlemore?
Yes.
Felder? Yes. Stilgrave?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes. Clerk, next item, please.
The next item is item 3478, consideration to adopt the 2022-2023 City Council goals and objectives.
Mr. Pastou.
Thank you, Your Honor. City Administration is requesting council to adopt the 2022-2023 City Council goals and objectives. The council met on a Saturday morning in early February to work out a number of the goals and objectives. We reviewed it at our March 7th meeting. What was presented to council was and highlighted were the changes made based on the comments received on at the March 7th work session. I think we have pretty much at that point covered all of the council comments that were received, and so I think we'd be ready to recommend adoption of these goals and objectives, and we've already started many of them with in the budget process for this upcoming year.
Thank you, Mr. Pastou. I'll see if there are any council comments or thoughts. I know that we had those sessions to really kind of put a framework together. I appreciate the follow-up conversation, as Mr. Pastou said, are highlighted there. A couple that I think were important to add. So my question for City Manager Brian, this is supported here this evening by the council. I know it gets published on the city's website, and there's opportunities that I know that's what the only thing you hang in your office is the goals and objectives of the city. There's nothing else, and every day that's what he sees, and people come in and sees that's what the objectives of the manager and administration is. So I want to thank the council for the work, Clerk Treasurer, your involvement and attendance as well in that discussion and getting input, and the staff support with the information asked. But when will we see this? Do you think it might be developed to the communications director to be posted?
Yep, Ms. Egan would work on putting together, the posters and kind of, put the polish to it, if you will, take it off a black and white, put it in a poster format so that we can post here in City Hall and offices and what have you. The one thing I would be, it's come up for discussion is to return to with the fact sheets that come before council, action items that pertain specifically to the city council goals and objectives. I know we got away from that a couple years ago, and it would be nice to, and we will return to incorporating those at the bottom of a fact sheet for council's consideration.
Well, I appreciate that. I know the council has found that to be beneficial because as we have items, where they fall within the work that we do, and the residents might be asking, well, where does that fall within the city's obligations? And then go to the goals and objectives, and maybe it's under communication, maybe it's under Goal B, economic and community development. And when we start having, additional there when they complete the Orchard East sub-area plan, why that, what we're doing and where that relates to, and why that's important. So, I guess that's all I'll say, unless there's other comments. Other comments? We have before us the goals and objectives, which, that's what I was going to say. We have worked on these. It's March. It's not like we just decided to have goals and objectives. This started even with the last council last term, but yet you have to get into this year with the current term, and we've had those sessions and input. And as Mr. Pastou said, some of these items are already in the process of being worked on and being achieved. So with that, a motion regarding consideration of the goals and
Your Honor.
objectives. Councilman Lamore?
Yes, I make a motion to adopt the 2022-2023 City Council Goals and Objectives as presented.
Motion by Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilwoman Germaini, on item 3478, consideration to adopt the 2022-2023 city goals, city council goals and objectives. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining?
Yeah.
Germaini?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder? Stilgrave? Mayor Clark?
Yes. Next item is the item that was added to the agenda. I don't know if Mr. Buds or Mr. Pastou, if you have something further regarding that?
Your Honor, we thought that it may be appropriate to just do brief review of the proposed agenda item. Or I
Thank
should
you.
say the proposed item that's now been added to the agenda. So as I believe you're all aware, there has been a development agreement in place for the former Lazy Boy headquarters site since December 3rd of 2019. And there have been a number of challenges for both the developer and the city as it relates to getting shovels in the ground, though we anticipate that in the near future. Some of those challenges I think are appropriate just to review briefly are the state support for school tax capture that was not complete as far as the entirety of the project. The pandemic and contemporaneous economic factors regarding additional costs for labor and materials, and I'll say a level of uncertainty in real estate development, combined with the issues that we've had regarding wetland mitigation with Eagle, some of the design preferences and the consequences of those preferences that the city has articulated based on the proposed PUD agreement and the standards that have been previously adopted, and some of the difficulties regarding stormwater management and an original effort to try to handle all of that to be in line with Mason Run without the need for retention or detention that ultimately were not successful as far as our dealings with the Drain Commission. And so for all of those reasons, the city administration and myself have continued to have ongoing dialogue with the developer, and we had presented an outline of potential modifications to the development agreement that I'd like to review just briefly. Essentially, the proposed amendment to the development agreement would indicate that the developer's contribution towards infrastructure on the site would be in the amount of $3 million. That would be reduced by a small amount for charges in connection with the closing costs, and that would be paid to the city upon the closing of the first parcel being transferred to the developer. It would not be need to be repaid until such time as June 1, 2032, at which time the city would continue to collect during that period leading up to 2032 on the brownfield tax capture for the parcel an amount, and there would be an obligation from the city to the developer out of that tax increment revenue for the $3 million plus 4% simple interest per year, and that those amounts, if not able to be paid in full at that time in 2032, would then be an annual obligation until the tax capture would end at the end of the brownfield plan, but would not be a general obligation of the city. All repayments would come from the tax capture from the increased value of the development. The proposal would also ask that the city administration initiate and recommend a brownfield plan amendment to the BRA, indicating that they would forego the administrative and local brownfield revolving fund capture until such time as the developer would be repaid for the amount just referenced above in the prior section. And that any brownfield plan amendment would also extend the term for as long as permissible under state law for the capture, and that any future brownfield amendments would require the consent of the developer. There's also a provision for a transfer to and from the city of the underlying ownership of the public roadways for purposes of creating benefit for the developer in terms of the opportunity zone. And then we listed for you a description of the necessary infrastructure that would still be constructed by the developer or their successor for each of the different parcels that are make up that development. So as a, for instance, stormwater flow infrastructure, sidewalks, necessary drive approaches and internal drives, and similar items would still be developer responsibilities. City would be, in broad and general terms, responsible for the Holiday and Huber Road infrastructure and the related stormwater, sanitary sewer, and other underground utilities. It would be anticipated that the Phase 2 infrastructure would be completed at some point in late 2023, and the other details are set forth in the proposed term sheet. Happy to answer any other questions, but that's a general overview of what I will say has been a long and interesting discussion with both the developer and the city administration.
Well, Mr. Buds, that's a general overview. I have to say that's quite a bit, and I think that while we say that, council had opportunity to have discussion, and there's an item that's I think will be included with the agreement. It's called a term sheet, is what it's been identified as, and that gets amendment to the plan, and that's kind of what's before the council here this evening. I'll see if there's any questions first from council. And I know that for those that are here and those that are probably watching, it's like, this sure is a lot. We've been talking about the Lazy Boy redevelopment site there on Telegraph Road. It's just the circumstances, just as Mr. Bud said, and how we're getting there, and to make sure we have an excellent development plan and things that are moving along. So if there's no other questions, Councilwoman Stilgrave?
I'll make the motion to proceed with the proposed amendment to authorize the city manager to sign the agreement consistent with the term sheet dated March 21st, 2022, related to the former Lazy Boy site development agreement.
Second.
There's a motion by Councilwoman Stilgrave, supported by Councilman Lamore, on the item that's been added to the agenda under council action, which will the clerk will assign a number 2 regarding the amendment to the Lazy Boy redevelopments under the term sheet as was presented. Any other questions? Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Vining?
Yes.
Germaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder?
Yes.
Stilgrave?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes. Next item, please.
There are no further items this evening, Your Honor.
So it's March still. Councilwoman Vining, any comments this evening?
I have no comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Germaine.
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to thank Parks and Recreation for spearheading the parks cleanup and the 8th grade class of Trinity Lutheran. These kids are future leaders of our city and county, and kudos to them for picking up those big logs and cleaning up that park. And I understand there's going to be more parks to come, so I want to thank the class and the teacher as well for stepping up and doing that for us. And also Mr. McGarry, who spearheaded the donations for the Ukraine out at the community college. They filled up a truck and everybody pitched in as usual. Our community is great. Our world is certainly changing before our eyes. So it was nice to see that happen, and thanks to the college for sponsoring it as well. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilman Lamore.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to thank the Monroe City residents that are stepping up to serve our city on boards and commissions. We put another person on our Monroe Housing Commission board, correct, tonight, and it's a great thing to serve your city. So for those residents that are looking for a way to help, to do something and to make a difference with the city, this is a way to do it. Not only does it help our city, but it helps us as council people as well to do our jobs. So thank you for stepping up to all those that do now, and for those of you that are thinking about it in the future, just come down to City Hall and we'll set you in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councilman. Councilman Felder.
Thank you, Your Honor. Recently attended the chamber luncheon, or the Chamber of Commerce. It was a good legislative luncheon where two of our state reps showed up. I know that I took the opportunity to ask them a couple of questions. I wanted to ensure that in the front of their minds up in Lansing was to remember the local municipalities here that still have to balance the budget at home, and to honor their outstanding state revenue sharing agreements. I think one of them said they probably get 6 of those requests a week, so I'll have to be sure to call next week to make sure he meets his quota. I think I know a couple of members on council were sent to CapCon recently. I think that the fact that the city pays for these is absolutely a wonderful professional development opportunity for the council members. Huge educational opportunities available, and also worth its weight in gold in terms of the advocacy that can be conducted and the partnerships that can be formed. So I think it's well worth the while that we engage these sort of items, and that we cover the cost for our members, because I know that other municipalities do not, and I think that they lose out by not being in the room. Thank you to Director Bentley for sitting down with me and having a conversation regarding the city's capital improvements budget as it relates to the Battlefield Center. We had a good long conversation, about 2 hours this morning. And of course, Eric Drummonds, our newest member to the DDA, who was kind enough to have lunch with me and discuss items of economic development in the downtown. So thank both of those gentlemen, and thank you, Your Honor. That's all my comments for this evening.
Thank you. Councilwoman Stelgrave.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't know about everybody else, but I thoroughly have enjoyed these last 2 days with the sun out and the beautiful weather. I think that's great. I was one of those that was fortunate enough to go to Lansing this week with Mickey, and learned a lot. It's great to attend. I will definitely be doing that again. And to you, Mr. Lewis, I got to tell you, I looked up a couple of these trees because I didn't know a couple of them, but because of my background, I do know most of them. I got to say, good choice. Good choice. So that's all I have, Your Honor.
Thanks, Councilwoman. I have a few items today to speak to. I think it was talked with Councilwoman Germaine on our work of our Parks Director. I want to thank her. But, you know, there's an item that's come out and been published here recently regarding the City Parks and Trail Survey. It's open for the public to have input. If you have thoughts, it's an online through the city's website. May get talked about here at our through the the manager's comments. But it's input into our 5-year plan about our pathways, our trails, and of course the Trails Committee that's recently initiated, and their work they're putting together, focusing how to make our community better and some quality of life things for walking and non-motorized. The River Race National Battlefield Park is having their art gala. That's things are finally starting to I'll just say just a little bit, that they're going to have this gala on Friday, April 1st. From 6 to 9 p.m. Tickets are available at the River Race National Battlefield Park and Visitor and Education Center. So if you want to attend, or I'm sure they have online purchases as well, just look that up. I want to remind the council, but also for the residents' knowledge of the upcoming work sessions that the council has, as well as special meetings. We have a work session scheduled for Saturday, March 26th, 8:30 in the morning at City Hall here. We've had several Saturday morning meetings, but it's ways to get some additional work done in the council. I appreciate their support and ability that we have collectively to be there. There's a special city council meeting on Monday, March 28th. It's a special meeting because it's regarding the budget. That's at 6 p.m., and that's the council's opportunity to approve the budget as we move forward. And according to charter, we have to have that done by the end of April. Appointment of the Housing Commission was mentioned. I appreciate the council's support in in approving the recommendation for Melissa Drake to be on the Monroe Housing Commission. Should be a great addition as well. There's a note I have for the items that were on the agenda this evening. It's the time of year where they always come up. I'm looking at the clerk. She may have some follow-up comments as well. But we have those delinquent invoices that come forward. It doesn't matter whether it's snow, grass cutting, blight. There's a variety of items. And on our agenda today to go to the public hearing, which will be set on April 4th. And then we take action on those outstanding invoices that were sent to people that were able to complete those assignments. But I know the clerk's treasurer's office always starts to get those calls. People say, well, I guess I forgot about it, didn't know. Please contact the clerk treasurer's office, and I'll leave that for our clerk to follow up on as well. Just a follow-up comment on the revenue sharing. I hadn't had in my notes, but when Councilman Felder said that, the revenue sharing that we receive from the state, while there is a 10% increase that's being proposed in this year's budget, I just remind, as I do, our representatives and others, that both Councilwoman Stelgrave and Councilwoman Germaine and I had the opportunity to be at the Capitol Conference with the MML last week, is reminding that we're still, the state is still short $45 million in revenue sharing of where it was in the past, of returning those revenues to the local communities to do work in development. Thankful for that there is going to be an increase, always helpful, but we continue to talk through the Michigan Municipal League and our representatives how best we can benefit from those in our community. So I'll leave it at that. Clerk Treasurer Lavoie.
Sure, I can just speak to the delinquents for a second. We will be putting public notices out to remind everyone of the public hearing, but of course, it's still possible to pay before the public hearings, and then your name will not be on the delinquent list and will not be considered to then go on the summer tax roll. So please contact our office if you think you may have an outstanding blight or grass cutting or snow. We had snow removal this year as well on it. Give us a call and we can work with you on that, let you know what and if you owe anything at all. Other than that, I have nothing else.
Thank you. Mr. Pastou, and I know you have a couple items you want to cover here this evening that we didn't get to in a work session, but some.
Thank you, Your Honor. And again, going back to the delinquent invoices, if by chance you get a contact from a constituent, we would prefer that, you forward them either to myself or the clerk treasurer, and we'll work to try and understand and resolve whatever issue that may be there before it comes back. A reminder, as the mayor mentioned, that we've got a meeting this Saturday regarding the Battlefield Education Center, but also included with that is the Economic and Community Development Reorg. They're kind of hand in hand, and so that's scheduled for this upcoming Saturday morning. The other thing with it is on the meeting on the 28th, we are going to probably request that it be a special meeting rather than a budget work session.
Okay.
Because the intent is to bring back changes to the PUD agreement based on tonight's action to amend the original development agreement. And I think Mr. Buds had indicated we should be probably ready by then to do that. So.
Thank you.
The other two items, I'm going to ask Loretta to come up and just do a quick overview of where we are with the neighborhood recreation projects contained in this year's budget. We're going to ask for some more money, and I know Mr. Sell is finishing up the budget, and so we just wanted to get that in front of council before it was finally presented from administration, and we'll figure out where we got to go. But Loretta?
Honorable Mayor and Council, Loretta LaPointe, Director of Parks and Rec. I have a short but captivating PowerPoint here for you, and it will be the highlight of your night. So,
Light on by your microphone at the base.
okay, many parks have not been updated since the mid-90s. A lot of old playscapes. 5 parks were slated for playscape updates in this year's CIP budget. Boyd, Frenchman's Bend, Huffman, James Hendricks, which always brings a smile to my face, and Soldiers and Sailors. 2 additional parks are slated for swing set updates and additions, Martin Luther King and Veterans. Here's Boyd, and I just want to point out quickly, that's what a cement border, there's only one that's partial, but that's partly what the cement border will look like. Frenchman's Bend. Some of these are going to look very similar because if we, some of the colors fade, like reds, yellows, oranges. So this way too, we can interchange, order extra parts if we needed to. So here's James Hendricks. Hoffman Park, which will slide across the park as well, besides being updated. Soldiers and Sailors, which is on the trail, be on the River Raisin Heritage Trail, so that's a little bigger. Here's Martin Luther King, and there will be an additional third bay of 2 handicap swings, 2 ADA. Here's Veterans Park that has that additional third bay of 2 handicap. We are really trying to put our best foot forward here. We really want to update some ADA things, include everyone, give everyone a chance to swing. We're going to add this at Veterans Park, which I'm really excited about. It's called the Veterans Park Brava Universal Swing. If you noticed on the last slide, the little seats, you have to lift, you have to be strong enough, and the user has to be small enough to be lifted up and in. This, any age can transfer from a wheelchair. I think this is really exciting, and if we have good success at Veterans, we could get more at other parks, but it's time for older users, larger users to be able to swing as well. Then we wanted to put some additional things. As Vince and I spoke, the playscapes are great, but we were doing so many at once, and we have a lot of old benches. So we have benches, they have varied in each park in downtown. Using one style is going to start to bring cohesion. Updated styles will elevate and refine the parks, take it out of a little more rustic look and bring it up. The trash cans are past due. We're currently using recycled, more of a rustic barrel. This way we can have one that matches the benches for just a nicer overall look. And the borders that go around the playscape, if you don't have a border, your engineered wood fiber, just the wood chips, they can bleed into the grass. It gets a lot of raggedness, they really bleed. The grass is choppy. So the next step up would be a plastic border. That border stands about 1 foot. But that can be chopped by a lawnmower, by a lot of things, vandalism, fades, doesn't look good, and it's not accessible. It's not easy entrance when you're coming up to that. So one of the things, here's our Park Palooza proposed, couldn't think of the last P word, additions. We want to put 2 benches at each one of the playscapes on a cement pad with an ADA companion seating. For those of you not aware, those listening, it's an extra square at the end of the cement pad for the bench so that you can back a wheelchair in or a stroller. Let people get right up. Everyone can come in and be the same. We want to add an updated trash receptacle at each one of these. And then the 4-foot cement walkway would border each playscape. It acts as a border to contain the surfacing, and Martin Luther King already has it. And it also allows entrance at any point. If you already have a wheelchair, a stroller, you need a hip replacement, you can't walk, you have any issue that gives you an uneven gait, and you're walking up and you hit a border, you have to walk all the way around now to find where you can find the opening in the ramp to get in. This brings everyone right in. These are what the updated benches, and the trash receptacle will be the same color as the bench, but those are very pretty. Well, this is why cement is exciting, and I know many of you have been wondering that tonight, and here's your answer. ADA accessibility is of utmost importance. We want to come right up and start getting all the parks where they should be. All people need the help. It helps to keep the fibers in place. It provides an accessible path all the way around the entire playscape. If you're a grandpa in a wheelchair, you can come to the park now too. You can be right up there and watch the kids. So that's several of the reasons. I can think of more, but we won't go into them tonight. So the funding, the cost of the playscapes was around $381,000. Just the benches and the trash bins was around $45,500. And these are really heavy duty. These are not just expensive. They're heavy duty, and they last. $130,000 approximately for the cost of concrete. So that would bring us up to about $556,900, or it could be higher. Let's say one of these parks, as you're standing there doing it, we realize there's one picnic table, then it's time to replace the picnic table. You know, we won't be able to do that like at Veterans where there's a lot of picnic tables. So we had originally set aside $460,000 from the CIP. So you can tell we're slightly over where we should be. So there is a shortfall of at least 97,000, if not a little more. But we want to make sure some of it we won't know until we get just a little bit further. And she's got a few numbers for me yet to come, just to make sure that everyone is connected by a walkway. You know, that there's a clear path, that if you're there and you need the walkway to get there, those are all in and all in place. Everyone deserves accessibility, everyone. These parks will be predominantly updated with putting this extra money towards. We want to reach out a hand and draw everyone in to fully play and participate in our parks. Residents deserve to be proud of their parks, and some of our parks really need, you know, again, Martin Luther King, we've already tackled a couple. Let's just go and make a really big dent when we're doing it all at once. I said short, captivating, and it was. I followed through. Any questions or comments?
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate the presentation and the updates. So see if there's any comments. You know, I appreciate, Councilman Felder, go ahead.
The benches, was that a wood or some composite material?
You know, I believe that's a composite. I'm almost sure it's composite.
Similar to what the existing ones are?
They're at Martin Luther King already.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then do you have the slide up on Boyd and Frenchman's Bend?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to get it back.
I'm sorry, you're ahead of me.
I can tell you this while we were doing it. Boyd actually had 2 playscapes, and the smaller one, I walked up to it this past spring, and the bolts coming through the slide. And so we had to take the slide off, and there was nothing left. And playscapes on 2 ages, like 2 to 5, 5 to 12. And we don't try to put 2 playscapes at each park. We try to put the 5 through 12, which has a greater audience, because most parents with the 2 to 5 are going to help their child anyway, you know, guide them down the slide. And so here's Frenchman's, or which one did you say, Boyd?
Boyd first, yeah. And then, my next question was about the age group that it would serve.
Mm-hmm. What we asked her to do, they're all 5 to 12, and we tried to ask her to make sure there were some things that littler ones could do. So, you know, the little ones, I think there's a slide on the other side of it. This is going to be one-sided. We didn't put all the different dimensions, but you can see there's there's a circular thing to crawl through. You can come up some of the steps. I mean, most parents aren't going to go up to the top of the high slide, but the bigger ones usually have a high and a low slide just for that reason.
Yeah. I have spent my fair share amount of time on the city's playscapes these past few years.
Yes, I mean, you can see the 2 slides on this one a little more. There's one to the right, but it's got its back to us, and then there's usually some things around the bottom for the little ones.
Yeah. And I know that there was some comments from some of the residents in these neighborhoods advocating for a younger age group accessibility to the equipment. Mm-hmm. Because it's really only possible if the parents are right there with them. Mm-hmm. And so that takes me into a sort of a strategy question on how you approach parks. I know that in terms of we divide them up into neighborhood parks, and then what's the next category? Regional
Actually,
parks?
we don't really use the categories as much. We're trying to make them just all uniform. So did you have a specific question about what's in it?
We didn't want to make so much the services that are provided at each, the activities that are provided at each, duplicative across the city. We sort of wanted to focus the theme of each one independently, so that each of our parks offers a different sort of thing. Was that the same sort of approach that we were taking for our formerly neighborhood parks? I don't know what the verbiage now is, but
we varied the playscapes.
Yeah.
I mean, they are, and if you go to Soldiers and Sailors, Michelle, please. You can see, because that one's going to be more used, you can see some of them do have the lower things, but on the right, there's the same cement natural log and kind of like a half-cut branch. Those are right down on the bottom, and those are specifically so that you can have little ones and they can be crawling and walking and playing. But usually we're trying to get something for little and big. And every playscape isn't for 2 to 12.
Right,
So
and
they're
you
predominantly.
can't afford to do that,
Yeah. But we usually try to have, like I said, a lower slide that they can lift and, just guide it down, whatever.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Germaini.
Loretta, the base of the playscapes, is that mulch or is that sand?
It's called engineered wood fiber. Now, see, on this one, it's not cement. That's that, she has them in different borders, but that's that plastic border, and then you can see the ramp on the left, but that's like a foot tall. So if you were coming from the right, you'd have to go all the way around to get in. That's why the sidewalk around just is so much more open. And then engineered wood fiber is a different quality than just like tree mulch. So we can't chip our trees and then take it to the playscape. So that's a higher grade and it's better quality. It's a different product. It's also considered ADA. The best case scenario would be if you had a poured in place, which is the slightly rubberized, which is what we have at Martin Luther, but it's quite expensive. If you're going to spend $75,000 on a playscape, that's probably going to run $75,000 as well. And it can't be in any place that floods. So Veterans Park couldn't have it because it can't hold that. And one of the downsides, and if you ever go out to the state park, I noticed, I kind of go and look, but they have the poured in place. They have a huge playscape. And so they do have like a 2 to 5 area, 5 to 12. But I noticed there's like spinners. And so when the kids are spinning, the only way to stop is they put their feet down and they start dragging their feet, which gouges that, and it's quite expensive. And I noticed I think it was last fall when I was out there, it's a brand new, they had to just put a brand new one down. It's all brand new bottom. So that's now you've spent $150 by the time you've replaced it. So we do usually use engineered wood fiber. But we did, if when we could get the money, it'd be great to put poured in place at all of them.
All right, thank you.
I guess I'll add the comment because I appreciate all the amenities that go with it. We have playscape and the use there, but having a good benches, having trash cans, and having the enough of those helps keep the place looking well as well. And the Downtown Development Authority last fall in their budget for this year already purchased all their new benches and trash cans. So not only will we see it at the parks, we'll see it downtown for a kind of the transformation and increase in trash cans as well. So we don't have people just discarding on the sidewalk. Hopefully they'll walk the extra few feet. But
More of a
it'll
continuity.
It'll tie together very nicely. So I want to say thanks. Thanks, Loretta.
Thank you. Again, we're going to try and come up with some additional funding. We know there's some potential grants associated to access for recreation that we may pursue, but I think those were a couple of nice add-ons to the playscape that I think, as Loretta would say, it embellishes and makes it far more accessible for our residents, but also from a maintenance standpoint, far more manageable as well. So just wanted to have that out there because it's kind of moving fast and we're going to end up having to make some decisions here shortly with the order itself and letting them know. So
All right, thanks.
thank you.
Your next item.
The other item that was on our work session tonight was discussion related to the Mason Run zoning. Going back last fall, I believe, there was a request to consider some changes to the zoning based on my notes, consideration of lot splits, hard surface waiver related to the parking surface, and then the accessory structures. And so, we've had this out here, and recently myself, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Buds, former Community Development Director Jeff Green, and our soon-to-be building official Lauren Bennis had a discussion about the PUD related to Mason Run in its entirety. And I think at the end of it, we concluded that if you were to incorporate these considerations that were requested, we pretty much would have to go back and do the whole PUD all over again, which is a pretty extensive process. And so, I think our conclusion was to keep it the way it is without going back, because it would change a lot of the character that's already in place, as well as anything that may future-wise be considered. So that's the, the quick version of it, but we did have a lengthy discussion related to that. So I don't know if Mr. Buds or Mr. Cochran have anything they might want to add to it, but that really was the essence of our conversation.
Your Honor, I don't have a whole lot of addition to that other than what the city manager indicated, other than that I will say that the PUD agreement applies across the board to the entirety of the site that was set aside for Mason Run. So I know obviously different phases of development, but if you're going to allow something inside the PUD, you're going to be looking at allowing that potentially in its entirety. And I will say, obviously it was I don't want to call it unique, innovative PUD at the time, which obviously the city had a lot of feedback from. You can still find articles on it from MML regarding new urbanism and those sorts of things. But essentially, the idea being a cohesive development according to the standards that are both in the PUD agreement and the pattern book. And so that makes it, I will say, a challenge in order to make any of the type of modifications that are envisioned without making those across the board throughout the development, which I think then has its own other challenges.
I'll see if there's any questions from council. I have a couple comments, if not. So as I think this through, because we've talked about Mason Run for, well, as long as I've been here and long before I was here. And, the development stalled and there's different sections and some have different items, but it's still all within the PUD about the design. So, and there's been asks in the past, as I recall, of continuing the development. And I was going to look at, I think about our goals and objectives on development. I know that there's specific areas that's beyond the Mason Run, but we also have the Mason Run to still work toward development as well through the council and our discussions and goals and objectives. And I know that that's specific in a PUD and style, and I think that the challenge is to find that will continue that process, but hopefully it's something that we can continue to do. And I know that that's been discussed with Mr. Cochran and administration. How do we finish that development as we move forward with others as well? A couple items that were in there that I'll just say that kind of stood out. And I don't think that's the only purpose for the request to come forward because of the lot splits and that. I understand that, but that's not how the PUD is. And to have that, it would require more than just saying go ahead to do it. But when I looked at this in some of the details that were asked and were listed here, eliminate some of the requirements regarding vehicles. But that's kind of how it was designed. As the city attorney said on this new urbanism, but when it was brought in, it actually received recognition and awards for that. And, decades later, you find out that it's not done, and maybe it's a little more challenging to develop, but hopefully we can still get there. But some of the requirements regarding vehicles and hard surfaces and changing definitions of inoperable vehicles, I see that to be an issue that we currently have within our community. And, with inoperable vehicles or vehicles sitting in yards. And I think we're citing those for that reason. In fact, it was just last week I was driving through there, and I was driving near there, I should say, and going down the street. And I saw the officers that were talking to a resident, and they were talking about the three vehicles that were in the property. And I think that's a challenge, and I think that's why we have zoning that just as the PUD has specific zoning and design standards, we have similar design or similar zoning throughout the city, and I wouldn't be looking to change that throughout the city, so I'm not sure I would be looking to do that there as well. So, but as you said here in your decision with or I say the work session first discussed with the administration and city attorney, we're discussing the process, but also difficulty making just sweeping changes without changing the entire PUD. I think that's where it's at. And I know that we have residents here today that brought forward the request as well. To me, I want to see us to finish the development is what I'd like to see, to make that what a neighborhood and a community area should look like, not with the spacing of the vacant properties. And I know that we extended some of the sidewalks already, and then maybe something we have to look at as we move forward in our capital improvements to continue that. And maybe that's the push that gets somebody to make the same accommodations in that subdivision, just as we do in our others. Just my thoughts. I'm just kind of going to review my thoughts as I read through your information on the fact sheet and the discussions council's had. I'll see if there's any other comments from council. Mr. Pastu, do you have other things this evening?
I don't.
Okay. Clerk, next item is citizens' comments. So at this time, if there's any comments from those present here this evening, please come forward, state your name, jurisdiction of residence, and be mindful of the time frame of 3 minutes. If there's any comments from those present here this evening. Yes, sir.
50 Mason Run Boulevard. The PUD, can someone tell me where I can find it? Because even your building code department can't find it. So you guys are citing something that we can't see to know the rules of our own subdivision. And when I was in the building committee, I was in the building office 2 weeks ago, Lauren said he had never seen it, but he had heard about it and he was reciting from it, but had never saw the written document. So how do I get a copy of that so I can,
I think we could find it,
I mean, but I kind of want to
And I
see.
think it's a good question. I think it's one that we should be able to find from past and make sure that's available for your view or anybody that lives within Mason Run, whether it be
Right.
the one section or the other section.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm Jennifer Lyon. I'm the owner of 450 Mason Run. This is my husband. So you guys say it's a unique development,
Sure.
you know, alleys and garages behind the houses.
Yep.
But if you look at all of Monroe, there is a lot of alleys in Monroe, and there's a lot of houses that have garages behind their houses. How does this so unique?
Well, I'm not a developer or a planner or a builder, but I can tell you it's unique because the recognition that it received, but also the fact that it's put in a fashion of the spacing between the houses it was set in a two-story homes along each other with the alleyway in the back, the garages in the back. Yes, we can go back 100+ years ago and look at in Precinct 1 where I reside, and many of the houses have those similar opportunities and that became the conversation when we were talking about converting one-way to two-way streets. It was there, but people weren't parking in the front. There is parking in the front as well, and I know it's a narrow space, but that was the design. That was the planned unit development, and the developer came in. And the properties were sold and people living, and that's what they desired. To change that now, when there's a desire of a different style, then you have all the people that moved for that purpose and purchased homes. I think it becomes complicated, but other comments this evening?
Based on the parking one we were talking about, the reason we brought that up originally is because we have people who have already put down gravel and the city's allowing them to park there.
There is,
But as we talked about before is when a house gets sold, you have to update the electricity and the plumbing. Why are we not updating the driveways? You know, we put this in place. The city has put this in place and saying you have to have a concrete driveway or asphalt driveway, but we're letting houses get sold and not bringing them up to code. How is that possible? How is the city letting that happen if we're not going to amend this process? Because we now have a lot of dirt driveways and a lot of gravel driveways in Monroe that people are parking on every day, but based on our city ordinance, it's against the rules.
Are you talking specifically in your subdivision or across
No.
the city?
Just across the city, period.
Right. And I will say that those that decide to put gravel driveways in across their grass is not within the ordinance and would be addressed. And if those that are there, then we'll more than welcome to follow up with them if we know about them.
Okay. But yes, so city mayor.
Mr. Buds.
Your Honor, I have two things. First, I have right here a copy of the planned unit development agreement. So if Mr. Kitson, I'm guessing Mr. Pastu may already have his email address, but we'll get that afterwards and I can get that over to him right away. The other part that I want to be fully transparent on, it makes reference to the pattern book, which I will call a large and comprehensive, each, I'll say, elevation for every house in the neighborhood. And I don't have that electronically. I don't know if that exists electronically. I know it does exist in the building department, and we're working on getting that, but I can get you the planned unit development agreement right away.
Understand like some of the rules that we have, and like I want to build a new garage now because like I own a full-size truck 4-door. And it doesn't fit in my garage because my garage is only 20 feet deep. And I don't know whoever drives a big truck, but it doesn't fit in there. But I was told that I could only build a certain garage based on this PUD.
Right, design, or the pattern book that Mr. Buds referenced.
My question
Yeah.
is this PUD, which is a great thing. I don't disagree with it. I mean, I love my subdivision, but it's kind of outdated to a point, to some extent, for what we have for vehicles in today's world. I mean, it was done in, when was it done? 1990 something, right? 2000?
Let me see here. Give me just a second. It was, this is signed early 2000, so February of 2000.
Right. So in 20 years, our vehicles have grown so naturally. We can't park them in. My mother-in-law has a Grand Wagoneer and lives in Mason Run 1. And she has to hit the wall to be able to park her Grand Wagoneer in her garage. So my question is I understand the PUD, I understand that. But how do we make some provisions for people to, now that the world is changing and the PUD doesn't change, how do we make those changes? Slight changes or even variances based on something like that.
And therein lies the real challenge. Is it is a very detailed pattern book, very, very specific on a lot of things. And while it's referred to as new urbanism in many ways, it's basically going back to an older style of development that had taken place
Correct.
possibly 100 years ago, where alleys were far more used for,
Well, like on my side of the street, I back up to the train tracks.
yeah. In your
So I don't
case, it's
have
a
an
different
alley.
story. Yeah.
Right. So
But-
my truck has to sit on the street because it won't go in the garage. So there's a whole dilemma there, right? So it's,
Yeah,
And
but
then-
I do think, just so you understand too, is that part of that development was to get away from, if you will, a heavy auto-oriented suburban style of development and fit it within what I think would be a traditional development with the way Monroe developed. And so
Right.
there is a difference. I mean, it's a different orientation.
But when
it
you
is-
when you go through Mason Run, if you drive through there,
yeah.
you'll see all the trucks on the street. We all own trucks, but we can't fit them in our garages. So now we block up the street. It's yeah, or we get someone whacks a mirror because the mirror hangs out way too far. That's why I'm saying there has to be some leniency to this PUD at some point or somewhere.
And it's an extensive,
I understand.
very, very, I mean, we'll have to, and I'm sorry Mayor, if I may just continue the conversation, but if you look at this pattern book, it is pretty amazing the level of detail that goes into
Sure.
every aspect of the development.
But my concern is the city went into agreement with somebody to make a PUD, but that person went out of business, and now the land is owned by multiple people, right? Because my side of the street is owned by one person, half a street over me is owned by somebody else who's now selling the lots, buy one, get one free because he can't develop them. And I believe the city owns Mason Run 2, the big spot in the middle between Mason Run 1 and 2, I think the city owns. So who's going to develop that section of the road? Is the city willing to put money in and start developing houses and putting in roads? I know it's a question you can't answer today, but that's a question that needs to come in front of council. If we're going to stick with this PUD and not have any variances, and I understand the pattern book is, trust me, I'm in the automotive world. I understand
Yeah.
things are black and white, supposed to be, but this can't be black and white, I don't think, anymore. At least not for our development. Our world is changing. Our automotive world has changed. What are we going to do when we have to have charging stations in our garage? There's a whole nother dilemma going on, and that's what I think the council needs to really think about as we talk about this PUD. It's a seriously hindrance that we can't develop our neighborhood because no one wants to, because we're stuck in this pattern book that nobody wants to build to anymore. Nobody wants that style house. So we live with we live in vacant spots. You won't let us buy we can buy the vacant spots, but we got to put a house on them. We can't join them to our spot to make our house better or bigger, to give the city more tax revenue from our property. We can't even take our own vehicles now that we own and put them in our garage and have them safe at night. They have to be on a street where someone can vandalate them or anything. Someone could hit them. But we have a garage that we can't use. And that's what I asked the city council to think about. And I'll be more than glad with the PUD, and I appreciate your help getting that, because like I said, when I talked to the commission, the building department, and he's like, nope, we don't have it.
Yeah. Well, there is PUD, and there is and the one challenge that we're going to have is to figure out how we can electronically copy the pattern book.
And then I guess the question is, I'm sorry, Mayor, to take up your time, but In that pattern book, does it really say my garage can only be 30 by 20?
Yep.
You understand what I'm saying?
I
right? 'Cause
understand
it's-
it. No, we had a pretty extensive discussion one afternoon regarding the details of it. It's not like we didn't give a lot
Sure.
of thought to your request, but it is very detailed as to.
And so there's no way to like get a variance to build a garage that's, even the city limits of 30 by 30, which is just 10 feet so I can park my truck in it, right? That's, I guess, the question to the city. Maybe we can talk later.
Well, there's, yeah, we'll move on, but there's, there's zoning throughout the city that, if somebody wants to put a garage in and they just don't have the space because they're on a 40-foot lot, which would have been a century ago, but that's the size of the lot and it doesn't fit when they want to put a garage and they have to get a variance. But then you start that, then all the green space is lessened. But that's a zoning issue, but we'll get the information to you. You can look at that and we can have more conversation.
Okay,
All right,
great.
thank you,
Thank
Mr. Kitson. Other comments from those present here this evening? Seeing no other comments,
Motion to adjourn.
by Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilwoman Germaine to adjourn. Clerk, please call the roll.
Vining? Germaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Felder? Yes. Stilgren? Clark?
Yes. Thank you.